instant messaging is very important, but it's also important to be able to post something, have people think about it for a while, and then come back and talk to it. Now, I've also been reading the book Naked Conversations by Robert Scoble and Shel Israel, and it's a 3-year-old book now, but it talked about the total shift that is happening with corporate blogs and blogging. And one of the things he says is, basically altruism turns people on even more than making money. And I think that's an important idea to keep in mind as you start working in community and conversation into everyday documentation. You're going to find motivations that might surprise you. So another area is called the mashup. And a mashup basically is usually defined as a web application. It'll combine data, combine functionality, and it basically lets you see things from more than one source. And in this example, because a map mashup is basically a classic example, this shows all of the Wii's that are for sale within like a 25-mile radius of my zip code. And these are data from lots of different places. It's from Craigslist, it's from, eBay. These are all kinds of ideas but with tech documentation, you may not have map data that you want to overlay. That may not work for your product at all. But as a user assistant example, one of the ones I like to talk about is that, this has been around for years, but it's basically combining a hyperlink with the data that lets the person launch it in context. So you're in your online help, and you're troubleshooting why your printer won't work. Well, you just click the button within Microsoft's Online Help that says, launch the printer's, control panel. And another idea of mashup that I think is starting to take on more and more of people's imagination is this idea that you can do remixes of content. And a remix on floss manuals basically means that from any book that is on the floss manuals wiki, you can go gather chapters from it and remix it into yet another deliverable. And in the case of One Laptop Per Child, I was able to write 2 major books. One was for the little green laptop hardware, but a second one was for the education platform software that ran on the hardware. And so by allowing us to separate out the hardware and software, we could do a remix that would allow us to have yet another deliverable. And the other nice thing about the remix, and this is, getting into the idea that we've known about for years, is the whole idea of single sourcing. You write it once and you can output multiple formats. But with Remix, you could have a PDF that contains only installation information, but then you could have a whole other set of documentation that would be output to HTML only. So I think this is where people are really starting to understand more about mashups and what that could be useful for TechDoc. Now, another one that I'm not sure how many people have really started using this in technical communication, but there is documentation for the iPhone on Flickr. Someone has a screenshot of their iPhone with an annotation on it. There are also videos out on YouTube that show people very, I guess I would call them like physical, what needs to be done to this printer to get the ink primed, and then you can tell that there's a lot of like bottles, and so what is it that you need to do, and someone walks them through step by step. But I think, video documentation for physical objects could be really useful. Now, video documentation for software is a little different. They call it screencasting. And screencasting is basically taking screenshots over time of what you're doing on your screen and then narrating it with a microphone. And one of the really easy ways to do this is a little product called Jing. It's Jing, and it actually uploads automatically to a website called screencasts.com. It's quick, it's easy, and I really like it for even internal collaboration where maybe someone in the field just recently showed me how to do accrual dues in our product. Accrual dues are where you pay a monthly payment like realtors have to pay for multiple listing services. They pay a monthly fee. And so it was a little bit complicated to set up. So he just did it as a screencast, and I was able to have the screencast showing on one of my monitors and my authoring tool on my other monitor, and I just typed in exactly what he was doing in the stepwise fashion that I'm used to in text and using our style guide. It was a great example of like internal communication sped up by screencasting. And I know that, you know, some people say that things should go viral, and viral video is when something gets sent really quickly through text messaging and email messages. And I don't really think that going viral is part of what's going to happen with technical documentation. And if something went viral and got sent very quickly that was actually inaccurate, you would have a problem on your hands. So it's very important to tread carefully into this kind of documentation. And make sure that you know what you're doing, or get people in your company who have already started doing this to help you with it. So, and then this is the last one that's kind of a category of social media, and it is virtual content, virtual reality, and Second Life. And Second Life is basically this three-dimensional world where the users can create objects within it and create avatars and create the things that the avatars wear and the things that the avatars use and hold and carry. And so it's this really interesting environment. I think it's probably going to mostly stay in the realm of like user training, those kind of learning deliverables. But for people who have to train people on physical devices, the idea of haptics, which are basically sense-based or touch user interfaces, like the iPhone keypad is a haptic device, and the Nintendo Wii controller is a haptic device because it knows where it is in space. And so if you had some physical training that you had to do where someone had to pour something very precisely or do other things physically with their hands, this might be an interesting thing to, you know, explore. But I think for the most part, Second Life itself, because it's really was built by artists, is not necessarily going to welcome any kind of corporate training or anything like that with open arms. But, you know, IBM is in there, and Sun is in there, and there are plenty of large companies at least exploring it. But anyway, for the scale of most people, I don't think Second Life is a good option. So that's the end of the list of categories that I see, and I'm going to try to keep things going. I know this is lunch hour for some of us, so I don't want to go over. But let's talk about social technology overload. It's basically when you're one, if you're one of those early adopters, and you started out with LinkedIn, and you linked to friends, and then you might have gone to another one. You know, once Facebook opened up to the non-college crowd, you went in there, and then you got this whole new set of invitations from something called, names, and you don't know what to do with it. Well, my ideas for evaluating before you really get overwhelmed is, which types of people in your network are sending these invites, and then ask one of them, what is it that you see valuable in this particular one as opposed to LinkedIn or something else? Figure out your goals and find out if there is a specific network that already has people that helps with those goals. You might also just trust a few people's opinions on a tool, and if someone you know gives them a thumbs up, try it for yourself. But a lot of this really is, trial and error. So, and also realize that many of these social networking tools may have been evaluated with an enterprise in mind, but they also may not have been even built with the enterprise or corporate application in mind. You may want to just try a grassroots effort if that's the case. Now, this is something else that I think is really important, is to understand the models that you could follow. What is your role as a technical writer? And the funny thing about this particular, it's actually a screenshot of this guy's blog. He considers himself to be a rock star coder, and I just don't think that very many technical writers are going to consider themselves to be rock star technical writers. But it may be something that your company needs from you, that you need to be more of this person who can stand up on the stage and be this talking head or media personality. So the two models that I talk about are, and this is in my book as well, is the instigator and enabler. And so an instigator may actually be more willing to take on a rock star role and go out and provoke people into talking about the things. But an enabler is someone who may just provide content and provide